Legend, a traditional story sometimes popularly regarded as historical but unauthenticated. A myth. This is the legend of 9/11.
It is 13 years since that bright, late summer morning when 4 murder weapons took off. But from where? 2 of those murder weapons, both resembling Boeing 767 passenger planes, headed for New York, where they crashed into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center. But we know as much about those murder weapons today as we did when they took to the skies on that dreadful September morning. 13 years on, and we still know nothing about the 9/11 planes. The third murder weapon, we were told, headed towards Washington, where it is said to have crashed into one of the most secure buildings in the world, the Pentagon, a building surrounded by scores of surveillance cameras, but from which we have only seen a few indistinct images of what we had to be told was the third murder weapon, a Boeing 757, which apparently disappeared almost without a trace inside the Pentagon, followed by a huge explosion. Of murder weapon number 4, the last to come down, we know as much as we do about murder weapons 1, 2, and 3. Nothing. Yet the scenario for an Academy Award-winning film was pieced together using a transcript from the alleged cockpit voice recorder from UA-93, and from air-to-ground cell phone calls which many experts do not think could have been connected, a position with which the FBI is now largely in agreement. The official story is that this plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania, but there was very little to see of it, and the debris was widely spread out, which seems to tally with eyewitness and other reports that murder weapon number 4 was shot down by Major Rick Gibney, piloting a U.S. National Air Guard F-16. But these stories soon disappeared from the mainstream media. It was alleged that 2 United Airlines planes and 2 American Airlines planes killed almost 3,000 people on September the 11th, 2001. But someone decided that these murder weapons did not need to be positively identified. Could it be that someone knew that the parts would not match those of the planes that were allegedly hijacked? Perhaps the most blatant instance of the suppression of important evidence is the fact that what was almost certainly the core of the right engine of the plane that hit the South Tower was buried in a landfill on Staten Island, over a year before the Commission began its deliberations. Since then, independent researchers have determined that this engine core almost certainly did not come from a United Airlines Boeing 767. This research seems to indicate that this component, called a high-pressure turbine cooling duct, is from a Pratt & Whitney JT9D7 series engine as used on the Boeing 747. Whereas this is the HPT cooling duct for the JT9D-7R4D series of engines, which are used by United Airlines on all of their Boeing 767s. But the engine found in Murray Street had this kind of cooling duct, so could not have come from a United Airlines Boeing 767. So if the South Tower plane was not UA-175, what was it? Whatever it was, I am certain that someone was waiting for it. While most cameras were pointed at the burning North Tower, someone had found these chimneys and selected a position so that a camera could be lined up to point at the sky above the Statue of Liberty. The camera position was a rooftop with limited access. As a cameraman, I am certain that the position was selected for one purpose only: to make a video record of the arrival and last few seconds of the South Tower plane's murderous journey. CBS, other US channels, and the BBC showed the video either on September the 11th or soon after, but whoever shot it remains anonymous. How could the 9/11 Commission's investigators not have looked into this clear case of foreknowledge? Or were they told not to look at anything that might go against the already established official story? But there was other evidence that the Commission was unable to look into because it had been deliberately destroyed. An audio tape from September the 11th of air traffic controllers recalling their experiences with the alleged hijacked aircraft AA-11 and UA-175 was deliberately destroyed by a Federal Aviation Administration manager between December 2001 and February 2002. And to this day, the authorities still refuse to release the serial numbers of any of the flight data recorders, including the cockpit voice recorder, you know, the one that the award-winning movie was based on. The numerous anomalies in the official 9/11 story add up to arguably the most colossal lie ever told. The two anomalies which stand out most, in my mind, are the failure of the 9/11 Commission to insist that the 4 planes that crashed be forensically identified, and, in its over 500-page report, the Commission's failure to even mention one of the most perplexing structural failures in the history of high-rise construction, the collapse of World Trade Center Building No. 7 at 5:20 on the evening of 9/11. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, has wasted millions trying to convince the world that this was not a controlled demolition, but the following video proves that it must have been. Listen carefully. The voices of the camera crew tend to mask the low frequencies, but if the voices are suppressed, that was an explosion. Listen again. The myth is that a critical column on the 13th floor buckled and triggered the structural failure, but a buckling column does not sound like an explosion. The inescapable conclusion is that WTC-7 collapsed due to a controlled demolition which would have taken months to plan and prepare while it was business as usual inside the building. The Twin Towers had earlier suffered similar fates, but architects, engineers and other experts are convinced that these buildings could not have been brought down by the aircraft impacts and the fuel and office equipment fires that followed. 3 giant buildings in a time frame of just a few hours, all showing the visual hallmarks of classic controlled demolitions. 4 unidentified aircraft and 3 controlled demolitions. What more is needed to convince anyone that the official 9/11 story has as much relevance to what really happened as this word as to this image? So the question is, what are you going to do about it? This video is dedicated to the memory of those who were killed on September the 11th, 2001. It is dedicated to those who have suffered and died since because of the immorality of the perpetrators of this terrible crime. It is dedicated to the innocent men, women and children of Afghanistan and Iraq who suffered and died in the name of abject greed, and to those they left behind. May some of them at least see justice done in their lifetimes.